A cryptic phone call leads to an alarming discovery.
As they pulled away each piece of the clothing, they were shocked to find that there was a person under there.
The suspected killer comes forward, but the case is far from over.
This wasn't a whodunit. It was a question of why she did it and whether or not it was justified.
She said she was trying to protect herself and her children from this madman.
He was 6'7" and 230 pounds. His body was a weapon.
But no one that knows him believes her claims. No one.
And as the investigation unfolds, the evidence suggests nothing is quite what it seems.
If he passed away in the morning and we didn't get a call till 11 o'clock at night, what was going on during all of those hours?
If she's lying about that, what else is she lying about?
On August 7th, 2012, police in Carlsbad, California receive an unusual call.
The on-duty watch commander for the Carlsbad Police Department received a call on a back line that's not recorded. That's very rare. And that has to have somebody who knows the number to that watch commander.
Despite the special circumstances, what the caller appears to be requesting is a simple welfare check for a resident named Jason Harper.
The person identified himself as the former district attorney, Paul Finks, who had now become a prominent defense attorney in San Diego County. The Carlsbad Police Department responded immediately, and they were there in the neighborhood within a few minutes.
The lights in the home are off, and no one answers the door.
They noticed that the doors were locked and there was no sign of forced entry.
The officers did check around the perimeter. They did find a door that was open, and they entered the home to do the check. It was very cluttered, but it appeared to be just a normal home with nothing out of the ordinary. Not find anybody on the first floor. They go to the second story and check all of the bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. As they entered that primary bedroom of the home, they were immediately confronted with many objects, almost to the point of a hoarder. Numerous items of clothing and bags on the floor. It was hard to navigate around.
It was just piled up on the floor like it was junk. And as they pulled away each piece of the clothing, they were shocked to find that there was a person under there.
He was noticeably deceased. He did not have a pulse.
We were able to, based on his height, his weight, and what he looked like, determined it was Mr. Harper. He was laying face down.
There was what appeared to be a bullet hole in Jason Harper's back on the side, and that blood had been coming out onto his shirt.
Officers secure the crime scene and homicide detectives arrive.
There was no weapons found near the body, but they went in the closet and they did find a loaded shotgun, but it was clear based on the entry wound that this was not a shotgun blast. Obviously, the fact that it was in a state of disarray and it looked like a hoarder's den made it particularly difficult for law enforcement to sort and go through the entirety of evidence.
As we looked through the bedroom, we found multiple bottles of prescription drugs. Many of them were empty and in bags. Most of them were prescribed to Julie Harper.
Based on the name, investigators assume Julie Harper is Jason's wife.
The police officers looked at the family pictures all over the house, and they were able to see the identity of the family that was living there. We learned that they had 3 children. The officers wondered where the other members of the family were. Where are the children, and where is the wife?
Not knowing what happened or transpired. Our biggest concern were the safety of the children and Julie. And we were trying to find out ways to figure out where they were. The best way for us to do that is to interview family members and friends that knew Jason, to get an understanding of who the person was, to help us tell the story of what occurred.
Jason Harper was born October 30th, 1972, and grew up in the greater Los Angeles area.
Jason was soft-spoken, just an easy person to be around. I called Jason the gentle giant, is what my nickname was for him back then. You couldn't miss him just because of his stature and his height. His demeanor was so calm. He could be very intimidating because he was tall, but just a sweet, sweet, sweet person.
Jason went to the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. He was a proud Bruin. It's my understanding that he was actually a two-time national champion volleyball player.
Jason remained single throughout college and for many years after. But in his late 20s, he met a striking young woman at a party named Julie Syack.
Jason Harper was a new teacher living in LA when he met Julie. They came from very different backgrounds and different neighborhoods.
I know she came from money. Her father is a successful businessman. Julie, I believe, studied at Harvard at some point. I think she also went to the University of Southern California, USC.
They were immediately smitten with each other, and Jason proposed around 6 months after they met.
Julie and Jason got married, they moved to Carlsbad, and they ended up having 3 children together in this neighborhood.
Julie really thrived in being a stay-at-home mom and made her happy.
My fondest memory of Julie is just hanging out and doing wines with the moms at someone's house in the neighborhood. Just having the camaraderie of women, really, and just laughing and cracking jokes and enjoying some vino and doing our thing. Also, Jason was a really good neighbor. There was an instance when our family was out of town and we got a text that our sprinkler had blown, and Jason, he immediately just took care of that. No second thoughts about that. He was a well-liked teacher at Carlsbad High. He was a high school volleyball coach, and he was a math teacher there as well. He never yelled. He never put them down. He was just soft-spoken. He was even-keeled. Jason was just an easy person to be around. Julie and Jason seemed like a really nice couple. They had these lovely kids. They had the supportive families.
It is the American dream. I know that's cliche, but they had what most people want. They fit right in. They belonged where they were.
Now, the Harpers' idyllic home life has been shattered by a horrifying discovery. Jason has been found murdered, and his wife and children appear to be missing.
The police need to figure out what happened, where's Julie, where are the children, and why is Jason Harper dead?
There are a number of possibilities. This could have been a burglary, however, there was no sign of forced entry, and the unusual manner in which the body had been buried under all this clothing didn't seem like your typical burglary.
The first thing I thought was there was some form of domestic violence that occurred, or potentially a kidnapping, but not having the evidence to know which one it was, we were really focused on trying to find the kids and Julie.
Investigators begin their search by speaking with the attorney who requested the welfare check.
He said that he was representing Miss Julie Harper.
Mr. Finks was very cryptic as to the details and didn't want to give away too much information. He just informed us that she would be turning herself in.
So you're obtaining a well-known defense attorney and negotiating when you are going to go in to turn yourself into the police. It was something that made us definitely on high alert.
This wasn't a whodunit. It was a question of why she did it, and whether or not it was justified.
Coming up, Julie's attorney goes public.
The defense attorney was already out painting a picture of a woman who was abused.
But in search of the truth, detectives turn to their only witnesses.
You feel sad? Does anybody ever get hurt?
One time.
The kids hear yelling from the master bedroom, and then they hear a loud thud.
Hours after the August 2012 welfare check on Jason Harper that led police to discover him shot to death, his wife Julie is preparing to surrender herself to investigators.
Her lawyer, Mr. Finks, informed the police that Julie and the kids were safe and that they were at her father's house in Scripps Ranch.
The day after the shooting, at approximately 3 o'clock, she turned herself in to law enforcement at her father's house in Scripps Ranch. Julie came out of the home and voluntarily went with them.
Julie didn't make any statements to police. She invoked her rights under Miranda to remain silent.
After that, the police execute a search warrant of her father's house.
They didn't notice anything of importance or evidentiary value.
Neither Julie nor her attorney offer any details to explain the shooting. Instead, Julie's attorney speaks with the media soon after Julie's arrest.
She wants to be with her children.
The defense attorney was already out painting a picture of a woman who was abused and was the victim of domestic violence. And he was able to begin controlling the narrative in the news.
Based on the timing and circumstances, detectives aren't ready to accept Julie's version of what happened.
There was a big question in my mind of why did she not call 911? Why did she not try to provide life-saving efforts if this was self-defense?
When someone says, I have been a victim of abuse in any way, shape, or form, we should believe them. But in this case, we're talking about a murder. It needs to be proven.
To verify Julie's claims, authorities search for any record of prior domestic abuse.
We did find one call for service at the home about a dispute between the two.
That call was made 9 months before the shooting on November 4th, 2011. The caller was the Harper's eldest son.
The police arrived and they determined that this was just a verbal confrontation and nothing physical had happened, and so they left.
Despite the lack of a history of violence, investigators know it's still possible it had been occurring.
In domestic violence cases, it's very common that abuse occurred for a long period of time before something's ever said.
They turn their attention to the only other potential witnesses, the Harper's children.
The children are 8 years old and 6 years old. There was also a baby in the house. And the first step was to have the 8-year-old and the 6-year-old interviewed.
The police took the children to do a forensic interview. And a forensic interview is basically an opportunity for an experienced professional to interview the children by asking non-suggestive, non-leading questions. The children were asked about any violence between the father, Jason, and the mother, Julie.
How do you feel when they're yelling loud and
I feel sad.
You feel sad? Yeah. Does anybody ever get hurt?
One time that fixed his skin, like Daddy grabbed one. But that's the only time she did, is at Thanksgiving.
At Thanksgiving that happened? Daddy grabbed right here?
That was a long time ago.
Right
on
there.
the list.
After establishing a rapport with the children, The forensic investigator asks them to describe what happened earlier that day.
Yesterday morning? Yeah. Tell me about the last time you saw your dad.
Well, he was looking for his computer.
Julie and Jason were arguing over a computer. Jason was going to leave the residence and get another computer when Julie told him that she had hidden it in the bedroom upstairs.
When your dad was looking for his computer, how did he seem to be? Did he seem...
He was pretty pissed.
Mom and Dad go upstairs, and then the kids hear the yelling from the master bedroom. And then all of a sudden, they hear a loud thud.
Both kids ran upstairs to the master bedroom to see what that sound was.
They tried to open the door. The door appeared to be blocked by something. Julie answered the door, and she basically said, "Your father just fell off a chair. He's fine. Go downstairs."
Eventually, their mom came out and said that Daddy was sleeping and that they needed to go.
The kids described going to a coffee shop.
The son said that they ended up at their grandfather's house.
Although the children didn't witness the shooting, their story provides detectives with a timeline of events.
They were watching a specific cartoon that they were able to describe. We were able to determine what time that cartoon was airing in our region, and we determined that between 8 and 9 a.m. is when Jason was killed.
The children said that they went to a coffee shop and they ended up finding a receipt in Julie's car for La Costa coffee for $9.41.
If he passed away in the morning and we didn't get a call till 11 o'clock at night that night, what was going on during all of those hours?
We took all of this information as well as the coffee shop receipt, and we were able to go and retrace her day.
The barista said that Julie was acting relatively normal and didn't seem frazzled or concerned or worried about anything.
It almost seemed psychopathic that she was able to go about her day in such a nonchalant manner while planning her next steps. The real question I had is what took place during the actual shooting? What precipitated this shooting? Was there a conversation, or was this a planned first-degree murder? And we needed to do some real forensic work to get more information so we could figure out what to do next and figure out exactly how this happened.
California authorities have arrested Julie Harper for the shooting death of her husband, Jason Harper. And investigators are skeptical of Julie's claims of self-defense.
When they first processed Julie, I remember looking through all those photographs, and there isn't a single speck of a bruise or a scratch or any sort of mark to indicate that Julie had just recently been in some sort of a physical confrontation at all.
Detectives hope an autopsy will provide more definitive answers.
There was a .38 caliber bullet that was recovered from Jason's body.
What we wanted to determine was the bullet entrance and its trajectory to help us determine what Jason's movement was at the time of the incident. Was he going towards her? Was he going away from her?
Generally, you would see evidence of stippling or soot if he was within 3 feet, and there was no evidence of that. Jason was shot in the left rib cage, kind of more towards the back of the rib cage, and the bullet traveled at an upward trajectory from the left rib cage and rested right here in the right pectoral, and it ended up piercing his heart. To me, what that entry wound indicated was that Jason was actually probably turning his body away from Julie at the moment that she pulled the trigger.
The day after the shooting, investigators still aren't convinced by Julie's version of events, so they turn to the Harpers' closest friends and family.
I wanted to know whether there was anything to corroborate her claim, whether witnesses had seen her being abused. After a thorough investigation, we weren't able to find a single friend or family member who was able to give any indication of past abuse.
Neighbors say it was Julie's behavior, not Jason's, that concerned them.
There was a lot of speculation because her demeanor, her persona, her personality has started to change in different ways.
After the second child was born, there was a shift in Julie's warm, attentive nature as a mother.
According to the neighbors, Julie's decline worsened after the arrival of the Harpers' third child.
Police are talking to a lot of people that know Julie Harper personally. And what many of them said collectively is, I don't know who this person is anymore. She used to be present, and now we don't see her. There was concern about her well-being.
There was some suspicion that she was going through postpartum depression, and that certainly increased the deterioration that she was going through.
Your house can't be 100% clean all the time, especially with little kids, but Julie's house was normally more well-appointed, and it was kind of a disaster over there.
When they offered Julie support, she explained she'd been suffering from various medical issues.
Julie was suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which is very debilitating and painful. She was prescribed by a legitimate physician medicine to manage that pain.
She was seeking doctors that would prescribe her opioids and narcotics to help remedy that problem.
It appeared that she had been abusing these medications because she was taking a whole lot of pills.
Police were stunned by the amount of prescription drugs that were in that home. 52 bottles is a lot. And when you look and see when these prescriptions were written, within a year, there were thousands upon thousands of pills that were taken.
Between September 2011 and August 2012, Julie's drug dependence deepened and began to take a toll on her marriage.
Some of the themes that we were getting from the friends and family is that it was clear that this relationship was kind of at the end of its rope. And my theory is that I think he said, I want to get a divorce. We should get a divorce. I think that really upset her because she was trying to save the marriage.
When investigators checked court records, they learned the Harpers were in the process of getting a divorce. But Jason wasn't the one who initiated it.
We learned that Julie had filed for divorce from Jason 5 days prior to the shooting. She listed that there had been verbal abuse.
We think she wanted to be the first to kind of set the tone about what was going on in the relationship. I do think she wanted to have custody of the kids, and so that's why she initiated the divorce herself. She's a clever, savvy person, and she's always thinking about the next step.
Coming up, a second search warrant uncovers a damning piece of evidence.
This appeared to me to be a getaway bag.
And Julie finally breaks her silence.
He was coming towards me with his arms raised, and he said, I'm gonna kill you, you.
Investigators have spent just over a week examining Julie and Jason Harper's personal lives. And while evidence of domestic violence is thin, they have found a motive for murder.
The divorce filing, it really just set the stage for her state of mind on the morning of the shooting.
She files for divorce and cites abuse. And she cites, I don't feel safe, he's abusing me, I'm afraid. Those are things she wanted to make sure were on record before she did this.
And when detectives speak with Jason's mother, they discover Julie's escape plan didn't end with a divorce.
Jason's mother, Lina, saw Jason the night before, and they conversed about Jason seeing what he believed was fraud on his credit cards. Julie wrote 2 $4,500 checks against Jason's credit cards and cashed those.
Bank records confirm Julie cashed the checks 1 week before the shooting.
Julie was able to withdraw the cash by forging Jason's signature. We were able to get bank video of her going into the bank, and the signature didn't match Jason's signature. This was a possible sign that she had been planning the killing. We believed it was related to her premeditation and deliberation. We also wondered whether he had confronted her about the divorce filing and the money that was stolen on the morning of the shooting.
As a theory of murder takes shape, investigators want more evidence to ensure a conviction.
We felt like we missed something in her dad's home, and we wanted to have an opportunity to search it again to gather more evidence.
Police did a search warrant on August 16th, about 9 days after the shooting.
I would say a dozen detectives and myself went out to really thoroughly search the residence.
We went to the garage area that has been searched before, and we went into an attic space.
While I was photographing the attic, I noticed that there was right as you get to the top, there was a blue JanSport backpack. I went back down the stairs and I was like, hey, detectives, make sure that you look at that backpack up there because it seems out of place.
It appeared that it had been hidden there, and it was hidden for a reason. So the police opened it up.
Inside that backpack was Jason's cell phone, Julie's cell phone, jewelry, Jason's last will and testament, some passports, and interestingly enough, a naked photo of Jason. He was laying on what appeared to be like a hotel bed in the nude.
That in itself is bizarre and disturbing. I don't know why she would need that.
There was also a .32 caliber pistol, and that belonged to Julie, that was registered in her name.
The caliber is not a match for the weapon that killed Jason, but to detectives, the contents of the backpack are telling.
This appeared to me to be a getaway bag. It's something that a killer would use in order to flee the jurisdiction.
I think the purpose of having the passports is for her and the oldest 2 kids to get out of the country. I think the jewelry is pricey, so she need to sell it. But the last will and testament kind of stumps me, because if you're found guilty, the money you're gonna get is not gonna be from his last will and testament.
The backpack was important. I think it kind of telltale sign. This was pre-planned. She knew. And then she did a really good job of retaining her attorney and making it difficult for us.
I would say the level of planning that she was able to go through after the fact and the steps that she took to cover it up showed me that she wasn't really abused. And as long as a person thought about their actions and planned to take the actions before the killing, that constitutes first-degree murder. We were ready to prove to a jury that this woman intentionally killed her husband.
In September 2014, 2 years after Jason Harper was shot to death, his wife Julie Harper stands trial for premeditated murder. As expected, Julie claims self-defense. But her attorney surprises everyone by putting Julie on the stand.
Most defendants choose not to take the witness stand, but this was not your typical defendant. She was extremely smart, and she was ready to tell her story. Julie claimed that Jason was loud, he was verbally abusive, and that she was scared of him.
She said she was trying to protect herself and her children from this madman.
As evidence, Julie provides video recordings of Jason's behavior.
You, bitch! Carpool bitch. Figure it out. Can't help it if you're too dumb to do it. Too lazy.
Seems like the B-I-T-C-H is the only word that you can use.
That is darn right, 'cause that's what you are.
He was 6'7" and 230 pounds and very athletic and very strong. His body was a weapon.
It can paint the picture that he could be this kind of guy that could become unhinged.
Once again, bull, I'm not paying for anything.
I'm paying for the vacation.
That's bull, I am. That isn't true.
When we saw these videos in court, I knew that they didn't make Jason look good because he was being angry and he was yelling at Julie. But just because someone's angry and yelling at their spouse, there's a huge step from that to physically abusing them.
And Julie swears under oath that Jason didn't stop with verbal abuse.
She claimed that she was repeatedly raped by him every single day.
I said, stop, stop. What are you doing? Stop.
The defense enters Julie's personal journal as further evidence.
The journal apparently was the evidence that would, according to Julie, corroborate her testimony that she was being raped by Jason. In her journal, she would write sex next to the date that this happened, and she said that the word sex was code for rape.
But aside from Julie's private journal, the defense cannot present any evidence to corroborate her claims.
It's hard to refute if he's not here. But no one that knows Jason believes her claims. No one.
Nobody had any indication that she was going to claim this until we went to trial. There was no physical evidence or videos or audio that would tend to show that Jason Harper had raped his wife.
Instead, the defense relies on Julie's emotional recounting of the events that unfolded on August 7th, 2012.
What Julie said was they were arguing with one another. He got this crazy look in his eye.
She said he ran up to her screaming and began taking off her clothes. She believed she was going to be raped again.
He was coming towards me with his arms raised, and he said, "I'm gonna kill you, you."
That was the first time we had ever heard Julie Harper say anything about Jason Harper threatening to kill her.
Knowing what I know of Jason and the gentle giant that he was, I don't believe he was ever like that.
I grabbed my gun from under my pillow. I turned around. I told him, "Stop."
Will you stop?
No, I said, "Stay back." Felt my hand jerk and heard a loud noise. And he was still like coming forward at me. And then all of a sudden, he froze completely.
And that he fell with a thud on the ground.
She claims she could tell within seconds that he was gone.
The biggest surprise during her testimony was what she had done with the gun.
She claims that she buried it in somebody's yard or something like that to preserve it for evidence, but it's our belief that she disposed of it because it showed her guilt.
To prosecutors, the story is an obvious fabrication.
As good as she was at testifying, I knew that her story was simply contradicted by the physical forensic evidence from the autopsy.
What she basically said was that he was approaching her and he did not turn away, and that at the moment that she pulled the trigger, he was standing directly in front of her. And so the physical evidence directly disputed what she said actually happened.
The medical examiner determined there was a single gunshot wound to Jason Harper's back on the side near his rib cage. The bullet entered from behind and traveled to the front.
After closing arguments, the jury retires to deliberate.
The jury, after hearing the evidence, determined that we did not prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt as it relates to first-degree murder and elected to acquit Julie. The jury was hung 9-3 for not guilty on second-degree murder, and so the court declared a mistrial.
I was shocked and disappointed at the outcome, and the prospect of having to do this trial all over again was a daunting one.
A trial date is set for the following year, and Julie is released on bond.
After the first trial, she just wanted to come back in like life is normal. So she was going to concerts when she was out living in the house that she murdered her husband in, having a good time.
The kids were, I believe, under the care and custody of Jason's parents.
As we approached that second trial date, Julie informed the judge that she needed to delay the trial again. We learned that Julie had intentionally become pregnant through an artificial insemination.
I absolutely think it was a tactic to try to be found not guilty by either being pregnant during trial and or having a baby right before going to trial.
A year after her first trial for the suspected murder of her husband, Jason Harper, ended with a hung jury, Julie Harper's second trial begins in September 2015 following an unexpected pregnancy delay. Whether the recent birth of her fourth child will result in sympathy from the jury remains to be seen.
Once again, Julie took the witness stand and she stuck to her story. It was a story about being a battered woman who was physically, verbally, and sexually abused.
Now that they are familiar with her defense strategy, prosecutors have a new approach.
What we were going to do is we were going to ask her about all the times that she's lied about this case. And there was literally hundreds of questions.
They carefully dissect each piece of evidence, pointing out inconsistencies. They begin with the videos the defense used to establish Jason's abuse.
You, bitch!
It was clear that obviously Jason was frustrated, but what was also clear to me is that Jason wasn't doing anything physically violent. This was strictly a verbal argument.
And then when you looked at her journal, things just didn't add up. She says that this man had raped her over and over and over again. Spousal rape, 30+ times is what she's accusing this man of.
But she also was writing in her journal at the same time that she says she's being raped, that she wants more sex with him. She was actually frustrated with his sexual prowess and wanted it to last longer.
That doesn't compute with someone who is violating you in one of the worst ways possible, continuously.
Jason's search history from the morning he was shot also contradicts Julie's claims.
Julie had said that basically that from around 8:30 to approximately 9 a.m., Jason was trying to rape her, essentially. And what we found was that he was actually on his own computer, looking up resources to help him with his soon-to-be pending divorce. He could not have been simultaneously browsing and searching the internet at 8:36 in the morning and raping Julie Harper. If she's lying about that, what else is she lying about?
The prosecution argues that Julie's desperation didn't stem from any alleged abuse, but her own dissatisfaction with her life.
Her relationship was crumbling, mostly because of her own actions.
She just snapped, completely just snapped.
This time, the jury is less sympathetic to Julie's claims.
Julie was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder and using a firearm in the commission of that murder.
She is sentenced to 40 years to life. 15 was for the murder, and 25 was for the gun charge.
I mean, normal people don't go around killing their husbands or spouses and go have coffee or whatever. I do believe that Julie got exactly what she deserved. That's a long time. That's a long time.
I think one of the worst parts about this, other than Jason losing his life, is that Julie took real stories from real people that sometimes don't make it out alive. And she took these stories, she concocted this plan for her own benefit and didn't think about how anybody else would feel about it other than herself.
Julie Harper ruined Jason's life. She shot and killed him. And then she tried to destroy his legacy by dragging his name through the mud.
It was all very shocking and sad. I think Jason's death could have been easily prevented. I think something within that combination of whatever medications she was taking or misusing and whatever was going on in her head caused her to snap. The biggest tragedy is the children. It's hard enough for a child to lose any parent, much less two.
They respect Jason, and I remember Jason. She killed a great, great man.
Jason was such a good person. He was such a value, such an asset, and just his loss was immense, and it was felt, and it's still felt.
To secure a conviction against Daphne, prosecutors offered Chow Tran a plea deal of immunity in exchange for his full and honest testimony. Chow agreed to cooperate. On August 26, 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand and described Daphne as a greedy, manipulative woman who used her spiritual influence to control his family. He claimed that he felt completely powerless under her psychological grip. The defense argued that Chow was a willing participant who wanted the insurance payout for himself, noting that there was no written documentation of the alleged $280,000 debt. However, the jury ultimately found the prosecution's case compelling. In September of 2019, Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in conspiracy. While the legal resolution brought some closure, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong, Liu remained a poignant reminder of the importance of community, vigilance, and the pursuit of truth. The dedicated efforts of the Arlington Police Department ensured that those who preyed on the vulnerable were held accountable, allowing the community to heal and remember the sweet, hard-working couple for the love and warmth they brought to the Lone Star State. The morning sun of Texas has a way of rising with a sudden, golden intensity, casting long and warm shadows across the pavement of Arlington. It was June 10, 2012, a day that began like many others in Tarrant County, with the gentle hum of early morning traffic and the sweet scent of blooming crepe myrtles carrying on the warm breeze. But beneath the quiet suburban surface, a deeply moving story of family, faith, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice was about to unfold. The gathering on the sidewalk At exactly 7:29 in the morning, the emergency dispatch center in Arlington received a call. The voice on the other end belonged to Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose tone was thick with mixture of confusion and growing worry. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, trained to remain calm and collected, listened carefully as Chow explained the situation in his earnest, accented English. My dad's name is Long, last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now. My family, my wife, my son, we want to check on them because they did not answer the phone. They saw the window was open, and everything inside seemed to have fallen down. We are too scared to go inside. To the responding officers, a welfare check early in the morning was somewhat unusual. Usually, such requests came later in the day, after hours of unanswered calls. Officer Weller, a dedicated veteran of the force with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the apartment complex. When Weller arrived, he noticed a large group of people standing outside on the sidewalk. It was an entire extended family, their faces etched with anxiety. The sheer number of people waiting outside immediately signaled to Weller that this was not a routine call. The family members explained that they had knocked on the door, but received no response. Looking closer, they had noticed that one of the windows to the residence was slightly ajar, and the blinds were disrupted. Officer Weller approached the front door, his hand resting instinctively on his utility belt. He knocked loudly and announced his presence. Arlington Police, is anyone inside? Only silence greeted him. Taking a deep breath, Weller opened the unlocked door and stepped into the apartment. The interior was in complete disarray, presenting the classic telltale signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, items were scattered across the floor, and the living room appeared to have been thoroughly ransacked. Compact discs were strewn about, and furniture was pushed out of its normal placement. Weller moved cautiously through the space, calling out as he went. Hello? Police officer. If anyone is here, please speak up. He checked the kitchen, finding it empty. He looked into the bathroom, but there was no one there. The only remaining area was the master bedroom. Weller stepped inside. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty as well. The officer stood in the center of the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the unmade bed and the cluttered dresser. He began to turn around, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk and that the apartment had been burglarized while they were away. He felt a brief wave of relief, hoping that the family outside would soon be reunited with their healthy, unharmed grandparents. But as he turned toward the doorway, his flashlight beam caught something on the wall next to a very small closet. There were faint, dark hand smudges on the plaster, as if someone had reached out to steady themselves in a moment of extreme distress. A sudden, heavy hesitation settled over Weller. Every instinct built over a decade of policing urged him to be cautious. He walked over to the small closet door and slowly pulled it open. What he discovered inside would stay with him for the rest of his career. Two elderly individuals, whom he recognized from descriptions as Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, were inside the cramped space. They had been bound tightly with silver duct tape around their limbs, and their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped in the same material. There was no movement, no sound. Weller immediately checked for signs of life, but was far too late. The scene was incredibly violent, with clear evidence of physical trauma. In that split second, the reality of the tragedy set in. Weller felt a wave of shock wash over him. He walked out of the bedroom, his mind racing, unable to speak or even use his radio immediately. He stood in the middle of the quiet living room for several long seconds, gathering his composure, before finally keying his microphone to call for supervisors and the crime scene unit. A legacy of hope and hard work. To understand the weight of this tragedy, one must look back to the year 2000, when Long Nguyen and Hong Lu first arrived in the United States from Vietnam. Like thousands of their compatriots who had immigrated in waves since 1975, they brought with them very little in the way of material wealth, but an abundance of hope, determination, and deeply cherished cultural traditions. They chose to settle in Arlington, Texas, a vibrant city in Tarrant County known for its diverse population and its welcoming, close-knit Vietnamese community. The area had become a haven for immigrant families throughout the 80s and late 90s, offering a supportive network where newcomers could establish businesses, preserve their heritage, and build a legacy for future generations. Long and Hong were the very definition of industrious. Soon after settling in Texas, they established a commercial sewing business. Because they spoke limited English, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, to manage the business affairs. Chow, who was energetic and spoke fluent English, became the public face of the enterprise, handling contracts, dealing with suppliers, and managing the day-to-day operations. For nearly a decade, the family business flourished. Through sheer dedication, long hours, and meticulous craftsmanship, they secured highly lucrative contracts, including a prestigious agreement to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, producing merchandise for Disney. It was the realization of their American dream. They bought a comfortable home, supported their 3 children and grandchildren, and became respected, prominent figures within the local community. Neighbors knew them as a sweet, generous, and gentle couple who never bothered anyone and were always ready to offer a helping hand. However, the tides of fortune can be fickle. By the year 2011, the national economy had shifted, and the family's business began to face severe challenges. They lost their major contract, and the steady stream of income slowed to a trickle. The sewing workshop, once filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines and the cheerful chatter of workers, grew quiet. As the financial pressure mounted, the family began to feel a deep sense of despair. In accordance with traditional beliefs carried over from their homeland, they did not view their misfortune as merely an economic downturn. They believed that a spiritual cloud, perhaps a curse or a misalignment of spiritual energies, had settled over their lives and their business. For generations, many families in their culture believed in spiritual guardians and protection of ancestral blessings. When facing major life crises, such as impending bankruptcy, severe illness, or legal troubles, it was customary to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors were believed to possess the ability to perform rituals, offer prayers, and lift negative influences to restore harmony and prosperity. Desperate to save the business they had worked so hard to build, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, began searching the local Vietnamese newspapers for help. It was there that they found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove powerful curses and restore good fortune to those in need. With a glimmer of hope, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged to meet her at her home in Houston. The family was deeply encouraged by her promises, believing that she was the key to turning their fortunes around. They could not have foreseen that this search for a spiritual savior would set off a chain of events, culminating in an unimaginable tragedy. The investigation begins. Within hours of the discovery, the apartment was transformed into a bustling command center. Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived to take charge of the case. Having seen some of the city's most challenging cases, Stewart was nonetheless struck by the sheer brutality of the crime. This is one of the worst scenes I've encountered in my over 2 decades in homicide, Stewart remarked to his team as they began their initial walkthrough. The physical evidence suggested a robbery. The living room was disorganized, items were scattered, and valuable electronics seemed to have been targeted. But several details caught the detective's attention, appearing almost too deliberate. On the coffee table sat a small plate containing crushed prescription pills. arranged as if someone had intended to consume them. Nearby, a partially smoked marijuana cigarette lay in an ashtray. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana carefully wrapped around an empty beer bottle left on the table. In Arlington, certain active youth groups and gangs were known to use specific colors, and a light blue bandana was a recognized symbol. At first glance, it appeared that gang members had broken into the home, committed the crime, and left their calling card to claim responsibility. However, Detective Stewart and his team remained skeptical. Sometimes, a crime scene looks a little too perfect, Stewart explained during a briefing. It was set up in a way that practically screamed gang activity. We began to theorize that the scene might have been staged to throw us off the track. To find answers, investigators turned to the family. Because of the language barrier and profound grief affecting the household, Chow Tran acted as the primary spokesperson. He met with Detective Stewart and explained that on the night of June 9th, the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long Nguyen's birthday. It had been a joyful occasion, filled with laughter and traditional food. According to Chow, the elderly couple had a wonderful time, staying at the party until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. Another family member had kindly driven them back to their apartment, which was the last time anyone saw them alive. When asked if the couple kept large amounts of cash at home, Chow admitted that while some older immigrants preferred keeping their savings close at hand rather than trusting commercial banks, his in-laws did not have much money left due to the decline of the sewing business. He expressed absolute disbelief that anyone would want to harm them, describing them as peaceful people with no known enemies. On June 11, 2012, the medical examiner completed the autopsies. The findings were deeply sobering. The victims had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted by a heavy, flat object such as a hammer. However, the head injuries were not the primary cause of death. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of heavy duct tape, and Long Nguyen's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The realization of the immense suffering the gentle couple had endured redoubled the detectives' determination to find those responsible. A sudden revelation. While the forensic teams processed the apartment for fingerprints, hair fibers, and DNA, a routine notification shook up the direction of the investigation. Detective Stewart received a phone call from an insurance representative. It was standard procedure for insurance companies to contact law enforcement when a policyholder died under suspicious circumstances, particularly when the policy carried a significant value. In this case, the life insurance policies on Long Nguyen and Hong Lu totaled more than $1 million. When Stewart inquired about the beneficiaries, the answer was unexpected. One of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, investigators invited Chow back to the police station to discuss the business finances and the insurance policies. Chow remained cooperative, explaining that the policies were established to ensure the commercial sewing business could survive and continue supporting the family if either of the elders passed away. Furthermore, Chow and the rest of the family provided consistent, matching alibis for the night of the murders. They explained that after the birthday celebration, they had returned to Chow's home, where they played card games and socialized well past midnight. Forensic analysts successfully extracted a clean DNA profile from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. They ran the profile through the national database, hoping for an immediate match that would identify the intruder. Unfortunately, the search yielded no results. The DNA did not match any of the family members, nor did it match any profiles in the federal database. It was a challenging moment for the team, Stewart recalled. When a DNA profile does not appear in the system, it often means the individual has no prior felony convictions, or they might be a minor whose records are not entered in the same manner. Without any new leads, the case gradually slowed. Investigators interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and community members, but no concrete suspect emerged. For 2 long years, the file remained on the shelf, a quiet testament to a dedicated search for answers that had temporarily run out of road. The thread unravels. The turning point came in October of 2015. More than 3 years after the tragedy, the Arlington Police Department received an automated notification from the state database. A fresh DNA profile had been entered into the system following a felony conviction, and it was a perfect match for the DNA recovered from a marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston. Crucially, at the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old because he was a minor with no prior felony record. His DNA had never been entered into the national database until his recent conviction as an adult. On October 17, 2015, officers located Willie Guillory and brought him to the Arlington Police Station. Initially, Willie was arrested on a parole violation rather than a direct warrant for murder, allowing detectives to gauge his cooperation. During the interview, Detective Stewart gently presented the scientific reality of the DNA evidence. He explained how modern forensics worked and why the presence of his DNA on the cigarette inside the apartment placed him directly at the scene of the crime. Faced with the undeniable facts, the young man broke down, weeping openly. He confessed his involvement, but insisted he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he was 16 and living under the care of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had approached him and said they needed to travel up to Arlington to take care of a matter. Willie, feeling he had little choice but to follow his uncle's instructions, accompanied him on the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington on June 9, 2012. When they arrived at the apartment complex, Bobby produced a key to the residence. Their instructions, Willie claimed, were enter the empty apartment, thoroughly search it, and intentionally stage the scene to look like a random gang burglary. They scattered items, left the blue bandana, the pills, and the beer bottle. Willie admitted that he had smoked a small portion of a marijuana cigarette and left it in the living room, unaware that this small action would eventually lead detectives back to him. While they were still inside the apartment, Long and Hong returned home. A struggle ensued near the front door. Bobby grabbed the elderly husband, incapacitating him with a heavy object, while Willie tried to prevent Hong from escaping or calling for help. Once the couple was subdued, Bobby used duct tape to secure them, and together they moved the victims into the bedroom closet before fleeing the scene. When Detective Stewart asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed a crucial piece of the puzzle. He stated that the entire plot had been organized and funded by a woman named Daphne Wright, a friend of his Uncle Bobby. "My uncle met with Daphne at her office," Willie explained. "She told him that some people owed her a large amount of money and refused to pay. She said if they did not pay what they owed, she wanted them taken care of permanently. She promised my uncle $10,000 to do it, and she was the one who provided the key to the apartment." Connecting the dots, armed with this groundbreaking information, investigators immediately focused their attention on Daphne Wright. They discovered that Daphne operated a highly popular spiritual advising business in the Houston area. She was a prominent figure in her local community, married with 3 daughters, and known for her strong, direct personality. She offered a variety of spiritual services, including rituals to bring prosperity, heal relationships, and remove spiritual blockages. When detectives reached out to Chow Tran to ask if he was familiar with Daphne Wright, they noticed a sudden shift in his demeanor, rather than cooperating directly as he had in the past. Chow immediately referred all questions to his legal counsel. This reaction heightened the investigators' suspicions that there was a deeper connection between the family's finances, the spiritual advisor, and the tragedy. On December 16th, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Facing 2 counts of capital murder, Bobby initially remained silent, but eventually chose to cooperate after being presented with the details of his nephew's confession. Bobby expressed deep remorse, claiming he was in a state of extreme financial desperation at the time, having been laid off from his job and facing the prospect of homelessness. He confirmed that Daphne Wright had approached him with the offer of $10,000 to collect a debt or eliminate the debtors. According to Bobby, Chow Tran and Hong Lu had become deeply involved with Daphne's services. Over the course of a year, as the commercial sewing business continued to struggle, Chow had repeatedly turned to Daphne for spiritual interventions. Instead of paying for each service up front, Daphne had extended a substantial line of credit to the family. Over time, the outstanding balance ballooned to an astronomical sum estimated between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family simply did not have the funds. Knowing that the family held substantial life insurance policies, a plan was conceived to utilize those policies to resolve the massive debt. Most shocking of all was Bobby's allegation regarding the key to the apartment. When Detective Stewart asked Bobby how Daphne had obtained the key to the residence, Bobby replied without hesitation, "She told me she got it directly from Chow Tran." The path to justice. On August 31st, 2016, investigators executed an arrest warrant for Daphne Wright at her Houston home, along with a comprehensive search warrant. Inside the residence, officers discovered detailed business ledgers. The records confirmed that Daphne was charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for individual spiritual ceremonies, with some ledger entries detailing outstanding balances of $30,000 and $40,000. Daphne's husband, Howard, was interviewed by detectives. He appeared completely shocked by the allegations, maintaining that he had absolutely no knowledge of his wife's business debts or any criminal activities, asserting that he believed her spiritual practice was entirely peaceful. Daphne herself refused to make any statements without her attorney present, maintaining a calm and detached composure throughout her processing. In order to build an airtight case against the primary coordinator of the conspiracy, prosecutors made a strategic decision. They offered Chow Tran a specialized immunity agreement in exchange for his complete and truthful testimony regarding the financial arrangements and the interactions with Daphne Wright. During his formal depositions, Chow explained the profound psychological influence Daphne held over his family. He described how they genuinely believed in her spiritual authority and feared that if they failed to pay their debts, she would place a devastating curse upon their children and grandchildren. Chow claimed that in a state of extreme distress, Hong Lu had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne and protect their descendants. According to Chow, Daphne had embraced the idea, but insisted that both elders must be included to ensure the payout was sufficient to cover the entire $280,000 debt. Although investigators remained deeply skeptical of Chow's claim that his mother-in-law had willingly participated in such a plan, his testimony was vital to securing a conviction against the mastermind who had hired the hitman. The trial of Daphne Wright began on August 26, 2019. The courtroom was filled with community members, family supporters, and legal observers. Chow Tran took the stand, detailing the massive financial pressure, the constant demands from Daphne, and the delivery of the apartment key. The defense team vigorously cross-examined Chow, arguing that he was using Daphne as a scapegoat to protect himself and retain the remaining insurance funds, pointing out that there was no physical paperwork documenting the exact $280,000 debt. In September of 2019, after hours of careful deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder. Under Texas law, she received a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Both Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced severe legal consequences for their direct roles in the physical crime. A community restored. Though the legal proceedings brought a formal conclusion to the case, the true heart of the story lay in the healing of the Arlington community. The tragedy of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu served as a powerful lesson about the dangers of extreme desperation, while highlighting the enduring strength of community that rallied together in the face of sorrow. In the years following the trial, the local Vietnamese American community in Tarrant County established a supportive outreach program. The initiative was designed to assist newly arrived immigrant families with financial literacy, business counseling, and modern legal resources, ensuring that no one would ever feel so isolated or desperate as to fall prey to predatory practices. Detective Stewart, reflecting on his long career in the homicide unit, found a sense of peace in the resolution of the case. Justice as a way of finding its path, Stewart shared with his colleagues. It may take years and the road may be winding, but the truth eventually comes to light. The memory of Long and Hong lives on in the strength of their children and the community that refused to let them be forgotten. Under the warm Texas sun, the sewing shops of Arlington continue to hum with life, a testament to the enduring spirit of hard work, family devotion, and the hope of a brighter, safer tomorrow for all who seek their dreams on these welcoming shores. Chapter 1: A Quiet Morning in Texas. The summer sun in Arlington, Texas, always arrived with a heavy, golden warmth that blanketed the wide streets and quiet neighborhoods. On the morning of June 10, 2012, at exactly 7:29 in the morning, that peaceful silence was broken by a call to the emergency dispatch center. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant. His tone was a mixture of hesitation and rising anxiety. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The emergency operator, trained to find clarity in moments of panic, listened carefully as Chow struggled to spell out the names. He explained that his father-in-law was named Long, spelling it out letter by letter, and that his last name was Nguyen. He mentioned that his father-in-law was in his 70s. Chow explained that his family had grown deeply concerned. His son and his wife had gone to the apartment to check on the elderly couple. Through the window, they saw that things inside were in complete disarray, with items fallen to the floor. The window itself was open, which was highly unusual for a morning that was already turning hot. The responding officer, Officer Weller, was dispatched to the apartment complex. When he arrived, he noticed a large family gathering outside the apartment. In his 14 years of experience on the force, he knew that welfare checks rarely occurred this early in the morning, nor did they typically involve an entire family waiting anxiously on the pavement. The family members were too terrified to enter the residence themselves. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, Officer Weller entered the apartment, calling out to see if anyone was home. The living room was empty, as were the kitchen and the bathroom. The apartment was in a state of complete disarray, resembling a burglary. The only room left to inspect was the bedroom. Initially, a quick scan of the bedroom revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Officer Weller turned to leave, holding his flashlight, but as he turned, he noticed smudge marks on the wall next to a very small closet. A quiet instinct told him to pause. He hesitated for a moment, feeling a sudden reluctance to open the door, but his duty compelled him to check every corner. When he opened the closet door, he discovered the elderly couple Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. Inside, they were bound with duct tape around their limbs, heads, and mouths. There was no sign of life. The scene was incredibly grim, leaving the veteran officer in a state of shock. He walked out of the bedroom into the living room, unable to speak or use his radio immediately. After catching his breath, he requested a supervisor and a crime scene unit. Chapter 2: the investigation begins. When the homicide investigators arrived, they were deeply shaken by the severity of the crime. Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years in the homicide division, noted that the scene was one of the most violent he had ever witnessed. There were clear signs of a struggle. The walls showed marks where the victims had grabbed them as they were taken toward the back of the apartment. In the living room, furniture was overturned and compact discs were scattered across the floor, suggesting a robbery. However, the sheer level of violence seemed excessive for a simple burglary. The victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, possibly inflicted by a tool like a hammer, though no weapon was found at the scene. The extensive use of duct tape, 25 feet wrapped around the wife's face and 10 feet around the husband's, indicated that the perpetrators intended to cause grave harm. The medical examiner later confirmed that the cause of death was suffocation. To the investigators, some of the evidence left behind seemed almost too deliberate. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills and a handmade cigarette. A light blue bandana was wrapped around a beer bottle, placed prominently as if it were a calling card. In Arlington, there were active local gangs known for using specific colors, and a light blue bandana was associated with certain groups. However, detective intuition suggested that the scene might have been staged to look like a gang-related robbery gone wrong. +++. Evidence found initial investigative theory. +++. Blue bandana attempted gang association. Crushed pills staged substance use. Scattered CDs staged robbery disarray. +++. The detectives collected genetic samples from a handmade cigarette, took hair fibers, and processed the duct tape for fingerprints, hoping to find a direct link to the perpetrators. Chapter 3. The American Dream. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000. They brought with them their children, their grandchildren, and a deep respect for their cultural traditions. Settling in Arlington, Texas, which hosted a vibrant and supportive Vietnamese community, they sought to build a prosperous legacy. The family established a commercial sewing business. Because Chow Tran spoke the best English, he became the face of the business, managing relations with contractors and clients. For nearly a decade, the business thrived, even securing a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major international entertainment company. However, by the year 2011, their fortunes shifted. The major contract was lost, and the business faced severe financial difficulties. In search of a solution, the family looked at traditional beliefs. In many traditional Asian cultures, it is common to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor during times of significant hardship, such as financial distress or personal crisis, to help restore harmony and invite good fortune. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lee, found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor advertised services to remove negative curses and bring blessings of prosperity. Hoping to save their business, Chow traveled to Houston to meet with the advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. She performed a traditional ritual, and the family returned home filled with renewed hope that their circumstances would soon improve. Chapter 4. The Shadow of Debt. As the months passed, the family's business did not recover. Instead of seeking alternative business strategies, Chow and his mother-in-law continued to rely heavily on Daphne's spiritual services. Over time, the cost of these rituals accumulated significantly. Because the family could not pay up front, Daphne extended them credit, and the total debt quickly ballooned to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne Wright was not one to overlook an unpaid debt. When she demanded payment, the family simply did not have the funds. However, Daphne discovered that Chow and his wife were the beneficiaries of 2 substantial life insurance policies taken out on the elderly couple, totaling over $1 million. Behind the scenes, a dark plan began to take shape. Investigators would later learn that Daphne allegedly suggested using the life insurance policies as a way to settle the outstanding debt. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, detectives interviewed Chow Tran, who was acting as the family's spokesperson. He explained that the night before the discovery, the family had gathered to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed the evening and were driven home by another relative around 10:30 in the evening. This was the last time they were seen alive. Chow cooperated fully with the initial questions, providing timelines and names of those present at the party. Genetic samples and fingerprints were gathered from Chow and other family members to compare against the evidence found at the apartment. When the results returned from the National Genetic Database, there was no match. The genetic profile from a handmade cigarette did not match anyone in the system, nor did it match any family members. Without a match, the case gradually went cold. For over 2 years, there was no new movement on the investigation, leaving the family and the community waiting for answers. Chapter 5, The Missing Piece. The breakthrough came in October of the year 2015. The national database flagged a genetic match for the handmade cigarette left at the crime scene. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. In the year 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old. Because he was a minor with no prior felony convictions, his genetic profile had not been in the national database at the time of the murders. His recent conviction as an adult finally brought his information into the system. On October 17, 2015, investigators brought Willie Guillory in for questioning under a parole violation warrant. When presented with the scientific evidence linking him to the apartment in Arlington, Willie broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He explained that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him for a job in Arlington. On June 9, 2012, they made the 3-hour drive from Houston. According to Willie, his uncle had been given a key to the apartment to gain entry and stage a robbery. The plan was to throw things around to make it look like gang members did it. Willie explained during his confession, "We brought the bandana, the pills, and the beer bottle. I smoked part of the cigarette and left it there." Willie described how they waited for the couple to return. When the elderly couple entered, a struggle ensued, and they were ultimately bound and placed in the closet. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie pointed directly to a woman named Daphne Wright, a friend of his uncle. Chapter 6, Unraveling the Web. Following Willie's confession, detectives focused their efforts on locating Bobby Guillory and investigating Daphne Wright. On December 16, 2015, investigators arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory at his home in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially reluctant to speak, Bobby confessed after learning that investigators had a warrant to obtain his genetic profile. He expressed deep regret and fear, explaining that he had never been in trouble with the law before. He had been laid off from his job and was facing severe financial distress when Daphne offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby confirmed that Daphne was the driving force behind the plan, motivated by the desire to collect the substantial debt owed to her. He also claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran. Detectives then traveled to Houston to interview 44-year-old Daphne Wright. She lived a quiet life with her husband and 3 daughters, presenting herself as a professional spiritual advisor. While she admitted to knowing Chow as a client and acknowledged hearing about the deaths of his in-laws, she refused to provide details regarding their financial transactions. A search warrant executed at her home revealed detailed ledgers of her spiritual business. The ledgers showed that she charged clients sums ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for various spiritual services. Chapter 7, Justice and Reflection. To build a strong legal case against the primary instigator, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony regarding the financial arrangements and the planning of the events. With his attorney present, Chow detailed the immense psychological pressure the family felt on the burden of the debt. He claimed they feared spiritual consequences if they did not satisfy the outstanding balance. He also made the unusual claim that his mother-in-law had offered to sacrifice herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne, a claim that investigators viewed with extreme skepticism. In August of the year 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, testifying about the heavy financial demands Daphne placed on the family and how he had left the apartment key under a doormat for the perpetrators. The defense argued that Chow was highly complicit in the scheme and was motivated by the insurance payout of $850,000, which went entirely to him. In September of the year 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced severe legal consequences for their roles in conspiracy. While the investigators expressed disappointment that Chow Tran did not face criminal charges due to the immunity agreement, the resolution of the case brought a sense of closure to the community. The trial highlighted the profound dangers of greed and the manipulation of trust. It served as a solemn reminder of the value of human life and the importance of seeking transparent, honest paths when facing life's greatest challenges. The story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee began not in the sun-drenched, sprawling suburbs of Texas, but thousands of miles away across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. For decades, they had lived a life defined by quiet resilience, surviving the turbulent decades of the late 20th century in Vietnam. In the year 2000, carrying nothing but a few cherished family heirlooms, their deep cultural traditions, and an unshakable belief in the promise of a new beginning, the elderly couple immigrated to the United States. They brought with them their 3 children, hoping to construct a sanctuary where the next generation could thrive. They chose to settle in Arlington, Texas, a bustling city in Tarrant County known for its warm climate and rapidly growing, vibrant Vietnamese community. The first major wave of Vietnamese immigrants had arrived in the area after the fall of Saigon in 1975, establishing a tight-knit, supportive enclave. Over the 80s and 90s, many more families followed, attracted by the excellent business opportunities, safe neighborhoods, and outstanding schools. Long and Hong studied the area carefully and realized it was the perfect place to build their legacy. To realize their version of the American dream, the couple established a commercial sewing business. They set up industrial sewing machines in a spacious workspace, where the rhythmic hum of needles piercing fabric became the background soundtrack of their lives. The scent of fresh cotton, steam from heavy irons, and the bright colors of various textiles filled their days. Because Long and Hong spoke very little English, they relied heavily on their 38-year-old son-in-law, Chow Tran, to help manage the operations. Chow was charismatic, energetic, and spoke English with a fluent ease that made him the natural face of the business. He negotiated with contractors, managed shipping schedules, and navigated the complex world of American commerce. For nearly a decade, the family worked tirelessly, pouring their sweat and tears into every garment they produced. Their dedication paid off handsomely when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture clothing for a global entertainment giant, producing garments that would find their way to theme parks and stores associated with Disney. For a time, life was sweet. They bought comfortable homes, gathered for large family dinners on weekends, and watched their grandchildren play in green Texas backyards. Long and Hong were pillars of their community, known for their sweet, generous natures and unwavering work ethic. They had no enemies, never spoke a harsh word to anyone, and spent their free time volunteering, or helping newly arrived immigrants find their footing. However, by the year 2011, the family's fortunes took a sudden, devastating turn. The global economy shifted, and the lucrative contract with the entertainment giant was lost. Almost overnight, the steady stream of orders dried up. The rhythmic hum of the sewing machines fell silent for days at a time. Bills began to pile up on the kitchen counter, and the heavy weight of financial ruin pressed down on the elderly couple and their family. In Vietnamese culture, when earthly efforts fail and a streak of severe misfortune strikes, many look to traditional spiritual solutions. For thousands of years, there's been a deep-seated belief in the power of spiritual harmony, ancestral blessings, and protective deities. When a family faces catastrophic challenges, such as impending bankruptcy, bitter divorces, or legal troubles, they often seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals, lift perceived curses, and restore the flow of positive energy. Hoping to rescue the sewing business from ruin, Hong Lee and her son-in-law, Chow Tran, began searching the local Vietnamese newspapers for a spiritual savior. 250 miles away, in the sprawling coastal city of Houston, they found an advertisement that seemed to answer their prayers. A woman named Daphne Wright advertised herself as a highly powerful spiritual medium. She claimed she could remove the darkest of curses, apply protective blessings, and realign a family's destiny to bring sudden wealth and good fortune. Desperate for a miracle, Chow Tran contacted Daphne. She agreed to meet him at her Houston home for an initial consultation. Accompanied by his mother-in-law, Chow made the 3-hour drive south. Daphne's home was filled with a heavy scent of burning incense, flickering candles, and elaborate altars dedicated to various mystical entities. Daphne herself was a commanding, loud, and direct 44-year-old woman who ran her household with an iron fist, leaving her husband, Howard, entirely subservient to her demands. Daphne performed an elaborate ritual for the family, promising that the dark cloud hovering over their business would soon dissipate. Hong and Chow returned to Arlington filled with renewed hope, believing that their financial salvation was just around the corner. But as the months rolled on, the business did not recover. Instead of advising them to cut their losses, Daphne insisted that the curse was far deeper and more stubborn than she had initially realized. She claimed that more intensive, expensive rituals were required to fully break the spell. Caught in a cycle of desperation and fear, Chow continued to pour family funds into Daphne's services. When the cash ran out, Daphne began offering her spiritual services on credit, keeping a meticulous ledger of the mounting debts. Over the course of a year, the unpaid balance ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne Wright was not a patient creditor, nor was she a typical spiritualist. She operated with the ruthless precision of a spiritual loan shark. She made it chillingly clear to Chow that those who failed to pay her would face severe spiritual and physical consequences. She insisted that she would collect her money one way or another. As the financial pressure reached a boiling point, Daphne discovered that Long Nguyen and Hong Lee held substantial life insurance policies, totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a primary beneficiary. A dark, horrific plan began to take shape in Daphne's mind. She proposed that the only way for the family to clear their massive debt and escape the curse was for the elderly couple to die, allowing Chow to collect the insurance payout and settle his accounts with her. Chow would later claim that his mother-in-law, Hong, out of extreme despair and a desire to save her children from ruin, had suggested sacrificing herself. However, detectives would find this claim utterly absurd. Daphne, driven by pure greed, insisted that one death was not enough. She wanted both Long and Hong dead to maximize the insurance collection and guarantee her full payment. To execute the heinous deed, Daphne turned to her acquaintances in Houston. She contacted 52-year-old Bobby Guillory, a man who had recently been laid off, was struggling to pay his rent, and was desperately trying to avoid living on the streets. Knowing his financial vulnerability, Daphne offered Bobby $10,000 to travel to Arlington and eliminate the elderly couple. Desperate and easily manipulated, Bobby agreed. He recruited his 16-year-old nephew, Willie Guillory, telling the teenager that they were going to head north to take care of a job. Willie, whose unstable home life left him feeling as though he had no other choices, agreed to go along. Daphne provided Bobby with a key to Long and Hong's apartment, which he had obtained directly from Chow Tran. The plan was highly calculated. Bobby and Willie were instructed to make the murder look like a random, violent burglary committed by local gang members. On the night of June 9th, 212, the family gathered to celebrate Long Nguyen's birthday. It was a joyful occasion, filled with laughter, delicious food, and warm family interactions. Long and Hong seemed happy and relaxed, enjoying the company of their children and grandchildren until about 10:30 in the evening. A family member drove the elderly couple back to their modest apartment, watching them walk safely inside. It was the last time they were seen alive. A few hours later, under the cover of darkness, Bobby and Willie Guillory used the key to enter the apartment. They spent the early morning hours staging a chaotic scene to mislead the police. They scattered compact discs across the floor, overturned lightweight furniture, and tossed personal items from drawers to simulate a ransacking. To firmly point the finger at local street gangs, they brought specific props, a light blue bandana, which they wrapped around an empty beer bottle, a plate of crushed prescription pills arranged on the coffee table as if ready to be consumed, and a partially smoked marijuana joint. When Long and Hong finally returned to their apartment or woke to investigate the noise, the intruders pounced. Willie ran toward the front door to block Hong from escaping or screaming, while Bobby grabbed Long, viciously beating the 70-year-old man with a blunt, heavy object. Once the elderly couple was incapacitated, the intruders dragged them into a small bedroom closet. There, they bound their hands and feet tightly with heavy duct tape. They then wrapped yards of duct tape repeatedly around the victims' heads, completely covering their mouths and noses. The perpetrators closed the closet door and slipped away into the night, returning to Houston. At 7:29 on the morning of June 10th, 212, Chow Tran placed a call to emergency dispatchers, requesting a welfare check on his in-laws. He claimed that his teenage son had gone to knock on the door, but received no answer, and that the family had gathered outside, growing increasingly worried after noticing an open window. Officer Weller of the Arlington Police Department was the first to arrive, seeing a large, anxious family standing outside the apartment complex, so early in the morning struck him as unusual. Upon entering the residence, he immediately noticed the signs of a messy burglary. He called out, but the apartment was dead silent. He searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. He walked into the master bedroom, which at first glance appeared unoccupied. As Weller turned to leave the room, his flashlight beam caught dark hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet door. A sense of dread washed over him. Hesitating for a brief moment, he opened the door. Inside, he discovered the horrific sight of Long and Hong, tightly bound and wrapped in duct tape. There was blood splattered across the walls and carpet. Weller immediately stepped out to the living room, called for backup, a supervisor, and the crime scene unit. Detective Stewart, a seasoned homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived shortly after. Even for a veteran, the scene was deeply disturbing. The medical examiner would later reveal that Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's in 10 feet of duct tape. They had not died from the physical beatings, but from slow, agonizing suffocation. The physical evidence left behind initially pointed toward gang activity, specifically due to the light blue bandana. However, Detective Stewart and his team quickly became skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, the gang symbols too perfectly laid out to be genuine. Most local gang burglaries did not involve such intimate, highly personal, and excessively cruel methods of murder. The investigation took a significant turn when Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company informing him of a $1 million life insurance policy on the victims, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. Detectives interviewed Chow, who provided a detailed, seemingly airtight alibi. He claimed the entire family had been playing cards at his home until late the previous evening. He cooperated fully, providing fingerprints and genetic samples, none of which matched the evidence found at the crime scene. Detectives collected genetic material from the partially smoked marijuana joint left on the table. They ran the profile through the national database, but no matches were found. Because the database did not contain profiles of minors or individuals without felony convictions, the case slowly ground to a halt. For over 2 years, despite interviewing over 50 to 60 neighbors and family members, the trail went cold. The breakthrough came 3 years later, on October 12, 2015. The Arlington Police Department received notification of a genetic match on the marijuana joint. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory. In the years since the murder, Willie had turned 18 and had recently been convicted of a felony for stealing a horse in Houston, which required his genetic profile to be entered into the national database. Detectives quickly tracked down Willie, arresting him initially for a parole violation to avoid tipping him off about the homicide investigation. When confronted with the undeniable genetic evidence, placing him inside the Arlington apartment, the young man broke down. He wept openly, confessing to his role in the crime, but insisting he was merely a pawn. He detailed how his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had brought him along, and how the entire plot had been orchestrated by a powerful spiritual advisor in Houston named Daphne Wright. On December 16, 2015, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Faced with the reality of capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed. He admitted that Daphne had offered him $10,000 to commit the murders because the family owed her a massive spiritual debt that they could not pay. Most shockingly, Bobby revealed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from the victims. Son-in-law, Chow Tran. The puzzle pieces finally fell into place for the investigators. Chow Tran, terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual curses and desperate to clear his massive debts, had colluded with her to sacrifice his in-laws for the insurance payout. Following the murders, Chow had quietly dissolved the sewing business, purchased a brand new home, and cut off all contact with the police, directing any inquiries to his attorney. To secure a conviction against the mastermind who had organized and funded the hit, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran full immunity in exchange for his detailed testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie. On August 26, 2019, Daphne Wright's trial began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy, manipulative monster who exerted total psychological control over him, forcing him to comply with her demands. The defense fiercely attacked Chow's credibility, arguing that there was no physical documentation of the $280,000 debt, and that Chow had simply acted out of pure personal greed to pocket the $850,000 insurance payout. In September 2019, the jury delivered their verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also handed lengthy prison sentences for their roles in the conspiracy, though justice was served to those who carried out and planned the physical act. A bittersweet shadow hung over the police department. Because of the immunity agreement, Chow Tran walked free, leaving Detective Stewart with a profound sense of unfinished business. Yet, as a veteran detective closed the case file, he held on to the enduring belief that true justice operates on a higher plane, and that what is done in the dark will always eventually find its way to the light. Chapter 1. The Morning of 7/29. The summer air in Arlington, Texas, during the month of June has a way of pressing down on the earth early in the day, thick with the promise of relentless heat. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, at precisely 7:29, the quiet hum of the emergency dispatch center was interrupted by a phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to 38-year-old Chow Tran, a Vietnamese immigrant whose words carried a heavy anchor of worry. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The operator, accustomed to the varied cadences of a diverse city, listened carefully as Chow struggled to spell out the names over the crackle of the line. "My dad's name is Long," Chow explained, his voice trembling slightly. "Last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now." Chow explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment. His teenage son had been sent to knock on the door, but the knocks returned only an empty, hollow silence. Through the window, they could see that things inside the home were not as they should be. The window was slightly ajar, and things seemed to have fallen down. Terrified of what they might find, the family chose to wait outside, praying for a simple misunderstanding. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience under his belt, was the first to arrive at the scene. He was a man who believed in the quiet resilience of his community, always ready to offer a reassuring word or a helping hand. When he pulled up to the apartment complex, the sight of an entire family standing under the early morning sun instantly signaled that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was far too early in the day for such a gathering, and the tension in the air was palpable. Entering the residence, Officer Weller kept his flashlight ready. He called out into the quiet apartment, but his voice only bounced off the walls. The living room was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered, and yet there was a strange, unsettling stillness to the air. He walked through the kitchen and checked the bathroom. Nothing. The only place left to look was the main bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Officer Weller, focused purely on the safety of the family, began to turn around to leave, feeling a brief wave of relief that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cooler air. But as he swung his flashlight toward the exit, the beam caught something on the wall next to a remarkably small closet. There were smudges, handprints. A sudden, instinctual hesitation seized him. Every seasoned instinct told him that what lay behind that small closet door would change. Everything. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the door open. Inside the cramped space lay the elderly couple, bound tightly with duct tape. There was no breath left in them. In that split second, the gravity of the scene washed over Officer Weller. In his 14 years of public service, he had never witnessed anything so heart-wrenching. He stepped back into the living room, his mind struggling to process the scene, before gathering his composure to call for backup, requesting a supervisor and the crime scene unit. Chapter 2, The Veteran Perspective. Within the hour, the apartment was filled with the quiet, methodical movement of investigators. Among them was Detective Stewart, a veteran of the Homicide Division with 21 years of experience. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, yet he still maintained a deep-seated belief in justice and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. As Detective Stewart examined the scene, he noted the sheer violence of the struggle. It was clear that the victims had fought bravely. There were marks on the walls where they had tried to hold on as they were forced toward the back of the apartment. The living room had been thoroughly ransacked, with compact discs scattered across the floor, giving the initial impression of a robbery gone wrong. However, Detective Stewart's experienced eyes caught several anomalies. Resting on the coffee table was a plate with crushed prescription pills, as if prepared for consumption, along with a single marijuana cigarette. Most peculiar of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in plain sight. ++. Scene evidence log. +++. Item location description. Coffee table crush prescription pills on a plate. Coffee table 1 partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Living room floor ransacked compact discs and furniture. Near entrance beer bottle wrapped in a blue bandana. Bedroom closet extreme volume of heavy-duty duct tape. In Arlington, certain local groups were known to use specific colors, and the light blue bandana resembled a calling card. Yet, the placement seemed almost too deliberate, as if the perpetrators were eager to claim responsibility or, perhaps, to point the finger elsewhere. Sometimes things seem too perfect. Detective Stewart mused to his partner. A robbery is usually quick and messy. This feels different. It feels staged. The loss of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee sent shockwaves through the local community. The couple had immigrated from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them a deep love for their heritage, their 3 children, and their grandchildren. They had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, hoping to build a lasting legacy. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off, even securing a lucrative contract to produce garments for major commercial giants, including Disney. The neighborhood remembered them as exceptionally sweet, generous people who never harbored any ill will toward anyone. They were the very definition of the American dream, living quietly and working tirelessly to support their family. But by 2011, the winds of fortune had shifted. The major contract was lost, and the family business began to face severe financial strain. Chapter 3. The Seeking of Solace. In times of great hardship, people often look to their deepest beliefs for a way forward. For Long and Hong, who carried the ancient traditions of their homeland close to their hearts. The string of bad luck felt like a spiritual obstacle. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces sudden bankruptcy or legal troubles, they seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform rituals, clear negative energy, and invite blessings of prosperity back into their lives. Chow Tran, who spoke the best English and managed many of the business's external affairs, began searching for a solution. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, operating out of Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advertisement claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses and restore good, fortune to those in dire need. With hope in their hearts, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, reached out to Daphne. Chow made the long drive to Houston for an initial consultation, where Daphne performed a traditional ritual. The family returned to Arlington filled with renewed optimism, fully believing that their fortunes would soon turn around and their business would flourish once more. But as the months rolled on into 2012, the expected prosperity did not arrive. Instead, a quiet desperation began to settle over the household. The family continued to pour their remaining funds into Daphne's services, hoping that just one more ritual, one more blessing, would finally break the curse. Unbeknownst to many, the spiritual debt was mounting rapidly, ballooning to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Chapter 4. The Silent Investigation. Following the discovery on June 10th, investigators attended the autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The findings were deeply unsettling. While there were signs of blunt force trauma to the victims' heads, the medical examiner revealed that the true cause of death was suffocation. The perpetrators had wrapped Hong's face in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's face in 10 feet of duct tape. The sheer deliberateness of the act pointed away from a simple gang robbery. This was personal, methodical, and incredibly cold. As the detectives brainstormed potential leads, Detective Stewart received a routine call from an insurance company. It revealed that the deceased couple carried a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, specifically $850,000, and one of the primary beneficiaries was none other than Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, detectives invited Chow to the station to discuss the family business and the insurance policy. Chow explained calmly that because the commercial sewing business was registered under his in-laws' names, the policy was a standard safeguard to ensure the business could continue to support the family if either parent passed away. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of June 9th, Chow provided a detailed and consistent alibi. The entire family had been at a birthday celebration for his father-in-law. They had eaten together, played cards until past 10 o'clock, and then returned home. Other family members confirmed the timeline, leaving detectives without any immediate reason to suspect Chow. The police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow, the family members, and various associates, comparing them to the evidence gathered from the apartment. Special attention was paid to the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. However, when the results returned from the database, there was no match. The DNA profile did not exist in the national database. For over 2 years, the case remained quietly on the shelf, a cold case that weighed heavily on Detective Stewart's mind. He refused to let the memory of the sweet elderly couple fade into obscurity. He knew that sooner or later, a single thread would unravel the entire mystery. Chapter 5. The Thread Unravels. In October 2015, the breakthrough arrived from the most unexpected of places. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because a felony conviction requires the submission of a DNA profile to the national database, Willie's genetic signature was officially entered into the system. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match. The DNA from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table in Arlington Back Inn, 2012 belonged to Willie Guillory. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been in the system during the initial investigation. On October 17, 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning under the guise of a parole violation. When presented with the undeniable scientific evidence, placing him inside the apartment on the night of the crime, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. "I was there," Willie sobbed, "but I didn't do it alone. My uncle, Bobby Guillory, told me to come help him with a job up in Arlington." Willie described how his uncle had obtained a key to the apartment, allowing him to enter without forcing the door. The plan, Bobby had explained, was to stage a burglary to make it look like local gang members were responsible. They brought along a blue bandana, crushed pills, and beer bottles to scatter around the room. Willie had smoked a portion of a marijuana cigarette, accidentally leaving behind the very key that would eventually unlock the truth. ++ murder for hire chain. ++ Chow Tran / Hong. Lee owed $250,000 plus to Daphne Wright. Daphne Wright orchestrated plot and provided key. Bobby Guillory recruited nephew for $10,000. Willie Guillory left DNA on scene, age 16. ++ when the elderly couple returned home, the situation quickly turned violent. Bobby had subdued Long, while Willie attempted to prevent Hong from screaming. After incapacitating them, they bound them with duct tape, moved them into the small bedroom closet, and fled back to Houston. When asked why they would target a harmless elderly couple, Willie revealed the mastermind behind the entire plot, a woman named Daphne Wright, whom his uncle had met through mutual connections. According to Willie, Daphne had claimed that people owed her a significant amount of money, and she wanted them to pay up. She had allegedly told Bobby, "If they don't pay up, I want them dead." Chapter 6. The Final Pieces. Armed with this critical information, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, on December 16, 2015, to arrest 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Faced with the reality of the charges and confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate. He admitted his role, explaining that he had been laid off work, desperate, and struggling to survive when Daphne offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby claimed that Daphne was a spiritual loan shark who wielded immense influence over Chow Tran and Hong Lee. When the debt grew too large to pay, Daphne learned of substantial life insurance policies. According to Bobby, Daphne decided that the only way to recover her funds was to have the couple eliminated so that the family could collect the insurance money and pay her back. Crucially, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. In August of 2016, detectives executed an arrest warrant at Daphne Wright's home in Houston. A thorough search of her residence revealed a detailed business ledger. The ledger documented her spiritual services, showing that she charged clients $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and even $40,000 for various rituals and curse removals. To secure a conviction against Daphne, whom they believed to be the ultimate instigator of the tragedy, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and honest testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He portrayed Daphne as a powerful, manipulative figure who had completely dominated his mind and actions, leaving him terrified of what she might do if the family failed to pay. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and clear the debt, a claim that investigators found highly implausible. Nevertheless, Chow's testimony provided the jury with a clear picture of the greed and manipulation that drove the conspiracy. On September 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Detective Stewart remained frustrated that Chow Tran walked away free due to the immunity agreement. He took solace in the knowledge that the truth had been brought to light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee was finally honored with justice, proving that even the darkest secrets eventually find their way into the warmth of the sun, leaving the community stronger, wiser, and united in the pursuit of peace. The threads of fortune. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, always seemed to bring a promise of fresh beginnings, casting a warm, golden glow over the quiet suburban streets. In this corner of Tarrant County, the air was often filled with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine and the distant, comforting hum of neighborhood life. For decades, this city had been a sanctuary of hope, a place where families from all corners of the world came to weave their own unique threads into the grand tapestry of the American dream. Among them was a vibrant and close-knit Vietnamese community, whose members had spent years building businesses, raising children, and preserving the rich heritage of their homeland. At the heart of this community were Long Nguyen and Hong Le, an endearing elderly couple who had immigrated to the United States in the year 2000. They were the very definition of gentle souls, known throughout their neighborhood for their warm smiles, their generous hearts, and their unwavering devotion to their family. When they first arrived in Texas, they did not see challenges. They only saw opportunities. With 3 children to support and a vision of a bright future, they established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest endeavor at first, operating out of a small workspace filled with the steady, rhythmic click-clack of sewing machines. To help them navigate the unfamiliar business landscape of their new home, they enlisted their 38-year-old son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was charismatic, articulate, and spoke the best English in the family, making him the natural face of the company. He handled the contracts, spoke with the suppliers, and managed the day-to-day interactions with clients. For nearly a decade, their hard work yielded magnificent results. Their dedication to quality earned them a lucrative contract with global giants, including prestigious brands like Disney. It seemed as though their American dream had fully blossomed. However, the tides of fortune are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the lucrative contracts began to slip away. The steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle, and the once bustling sewing shop fell silent. The family found themselves facing severe financial strain, watching their life savings evaporate. In Vietnamese culture, when hard work and dedication failed to ward off misfortune, many turned to the ancient traditions of spiritualism and mysticism. For thousands of years, people have believed in the power of spiritual advisors to lift curses, appease the gods of wealth, and restore harmony to a troubled home. Desperate to save the business and protect his family from ruin, Chow Tran, encouraged by his mother-in-law, began searching for a spiritual solution. In the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. Her name was Daphne Wright. She claimed to possess the extraordinary ability to remove bad luck, lift generational curses, and invite immense prosperity. To a family standing on the brink of financial ruin, she seemed like a beacon of hope. Chow made the long drive to Houston to consult with Daphne. In her quiet home, surrounded by the fragrant smoke of incense and the soft chime of ritual bells, Daphne performed a ceremony designed to turn their fortunes around. The family felt a profound sense of relief, believing that their dark days were finally behind them. Yet, as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead of stepping away, the family became deeply ensnared in Daphne's rituals. She began to offer her services on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned. Before they knew it, they owed her an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. A shadow in the morning. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, the peaceful atmosphere of Arlington was shattered. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers received a frantic call from Chow Tran. His voice trembled with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained to the dispatcher that his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, who was 70-something years old, and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, were not answering their door. Chow, along with his wife and teenage son, had gone to the apartment, only to find the windows open and an eerie silence hanging over the home. An experienced officer, Officer Weller, was quickly dispatched to the apartment complex. When he arrived, he noticed the entire family standing outside on the pavement, their faces pale with worry. It was far too early in the morning for a typical welfare check, and the sheer number of family members gathered outside immediately signaled that something was. Deeply amiss, Officer Weller approached the front door and knocked, calling out into the quiet apartment. Receiving no response, he carefully stepped inside. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray. Drawers were pulled out, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned, presenting all the classic hallmarks of burglary. Officer Weller searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding no one. Finally, he approached the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty. He turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall, he stopped. Next to a small closet door, there were faint hand smudges on the drywall. A sudden, instinctual hesitation gripped him. Every seasoned instinct told him that opening that door would change everything, yet his duty compelled him forward. He reached out, turned the handle, and pulled the closet door open. Inside the small closet lay Long and Hong. They had been bound with a massive amount of duct tape, their heads and mouths completely wrapped. It was immediately clear that they had passed away. Officer Weller, despite his 14 years of experience, was left momentarily speechless by the gravity of the scene. He stepped back into the living room, took a deep breath, and called for backup, requesting homicide investigators and the crime scene unit. When the veteran homicide detectives, including Detective Stewart, arrived, they were deeply shaken by the severity of the crime. Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years in the homicide division, noted that this was one of the most tragic scenes he had ever encountered. The physical evidence suggested a struggle had begun right at the front entrance, with traces of a physical altercation marking the carpet, the couch, and the walls. At first, the scene looked like a robbery gone wrong. To reinforce this theory, the perpetrators had left behind highly specific items: a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table, a marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a beer bottle. To the investigators, the blue bandana looked almost like a gang signature. Arlington had several active youth gangs at the time, and the color of the bandana pointed directly toward them. Yet, to an experienced detective, the scene felt almost too perfect, as if it had been deliberately staged to lead the police down a false path. The search for answers. The autopsy conducted at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office revealed a devastating truth. While the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, likely from a heavy object like a hammer or a bat, that was not the cause of their passing. Instead, they had suffocated due to the extreme amount of duct tape wrapped around their faces. The examiner noted that Hong's face had been bound with 25 feet of tape, while Long's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of tape. The sheer malice required to commit such an act pointed to something far more personal than a random robbery. As the detectives began interviewing the family, Chow Tran acted as the primary spokesperson due to his strong command of English. He told Detective Stewart that the entire family had been celebrating Long's birthday the previous evening. They had played cards and enjoyed each other's company until 10 o'clock at night, after which another family member had driven the elderly couple home. Chow claimed that his in-laws did not keep much money in the house and had no known enemies in the community. They were simply sweet, hard-working grandparents who kept to themselves. The investigation took a sudden turn when Detective Stewart received a phone call from insurance company. The representative informed him that the deceased couple held a substantial life insurance policy worth $1 million. When the detective inquired about the beneficiaries, he was surprised to learn that Chow Tran himself was named on the policy. Detectives immediately brought Chow in for further questioning. Chow explained that the insurance policy was established to ensure that the commercial sewing business could survive and continue supporting the family if anything were to happen to the elders. He cooperated fully, providing a seamless timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the tragedy. Every family member present at the birthday party backed up his alibi, leaving the police with no legal grounds to suspect him. The forensics team processed the staged items from the apartment, extracting a clear DNA profile from the discarded marijuana cigarette. They compared the DNA against Chow, the other family members, and the national database known as the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. To their profound disappointment, the results returned no matches, because the database only contains the profiles of convicted felons. The investigators hypothesized that the suspect might be a juvenile or someone who had never been arrested before. With no fresh leads, no fingerprint matches, and dozens of interviews yielding no new suspects, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The months stretched into years, and the case eventually grew cold. For over 2 years, the file sat on a shelf, waiting for a single piece of the puzzle to fall into place. The lost thread found. The breakthrough came in the autumn of 2015, over 3 years after the tragedy. In a seemingly unrelated incident in Houston, a young man was arrested for a felony offense: stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, livestock theft is treated with great severity, and the arrest required the young man, named Willie Guillory, to submit his DNA to the state database. When Willie's DNA profile was uploaded into CODIS, the system instantly flagged a perfect match. His genetic profile matched the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene in Arlington back in 2012. At the time of the offense, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been in the system during the initial investigation. On October 17, 2015, Arlington police officers apprehended Willie on a parole violation. In the interrogation room, when confronted with the undeniable scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down. He wept openly and confessed to his involvement, but he insisted that he was not the mastermind. He had merely been a follower. Willie revealed that in June of 2012, his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, had convinced him to take a road trip from Houston to Arlington. Bobby had obtained a key to the apartment and instructed Willie to help him stage a robbery. Together, they had scattered items, left the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the crushed pills to make it look like local gang members were responsible. Willie admitted that he had smoked a marijuana cigarette and left it behind, entirely unaware that he was leaving the key to his own undoing. When Long and Hong returned home that evening, the situation turned violent. Willie claimed that Bobby attacked the couple to subdue them, and then instructed Willie to help carry them into the bedroom closet. It was there that Bobby bound them with duct tape. When asked why they would target a harmless elderly couple, Willie delivered a stunning revelation. He explained that the entire crime was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a woman named Daphne. Wright, a spiritual advisor in Houston who was close friends with his uncle Bobby. Willie recalled overhearing Daphne telling Bobby that the couple owed her a massive amount of money and that she wanted them gone if they failed to pay. The mastermind unveiled. Armed with this critical confession, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory on December 16, 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, initially remained silent, but when presented with the evidence in his nephew's statement, he chose to confess. He explained that he had been in a desperate financial situation in 2011, having lost his job and facing homelessness. Daphne had exploited his financial vulnerability, offering him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby painted a vivid picture of Daphne Wright as a commanding, manipulative figure who operated like a spiritual loan shark. She had convinced Chow Tran and Hong Lu that their business failures were the result of a powerful curse that only she could lift, as they fell deeper into debt trying to pay for her rituals. Daphne learned of the substantial life insurance policies. She realized that the only way to recoup her money was to ensure the policy was paid out, which required the passing of the policyholders. According to Bobby, Daphne had provided him with the key to the apartment. When the detectives asked Bobby where Daphne had gotten the key, his answer shook them to the core. She had gotten it directly from Chow Tran. Detectives immediately moved to arrest Daphne right at her home in Houston. During a thorough search of her residence, investigators discovered a detailed ledger. The book contained meticulous records of her clients, detailing charges of $10,000, $20,000, and even $40,000 for various spiritual services, including the placement and removal of curses. It was a highly lucrative operation built entirely on the fear and desperation of vulnerable families. To build an airtight case against Daphne, the prosecution made a strategic decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow agreed to cooperate, explaining to the court that his family had been utterly terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual powers, believing that she could ruin their lives with a curse if they did not pay their debts. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law had even suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne off, a claim that detectives viewed with great skepticism, but which highlighted the intense psychological control Daphne held over family. In August of 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, testifying in detail about Daphne's greed, her threats, and how he had left the apartment key under a doormat for her associates to find, despite the defense's attempts to portray Chow as the sole conspirator who wanted the insurance payout for himself. The jury was thoroughly convinced of Daphne's central role as a mastermind. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of capital murder. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would never again prey on the fears of others. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy, though the detectives felt a lingering sadness that Chow Tran did not face legal consequences due to his immunity agreement. They found comfort in the knowledge that the truth had been brought fully into the light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was honored through the pursuit of justice, leaving the community with a powerful reminder that honesty, compassion, and truth will always triumph over greed and darkness. The sun always seemed to rise with a particular kind of promise over Arlington, Texas. In the early years of the new millennium, the city was hummed by a quiet, industrious energy. Among the thousands who had come to build a life in this vibrant corner of Tarrant County were Long, Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their treasured family traditions, a deep respect for their heritage, and an unwavering belief in the American dream. For Long and Hong, the journey from Vietnam had been a long, winding road. Like many who had arrived in previous generations, especially during the first great wave after the historic events of 1975, they found comfort and familiarity in the close-knit local Vietnamese community. Arlington had become a sanctuary where the old world and the new world met. Here, supermarkets smelled of fresh star anise and lemongrass, while the streets outside echoed with the familiar hum of American commerce. Determined to create a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren, Long and Hong established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, filled with the steady, rhythmic click-clack of sewing machines and the colorful cascades of cotton, silk, and polyester. To help manage the growing enterprise, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old who spoke fluent English and possessed a natural knack for business communication. Chow quickly became the public face of the company, negotiating contracts, welcoming clients, and handling the daily operational details. For nearly a decade, their hard work yielded beautiful results. The family business flourished, culminating in a highly prestigious contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than Disney itself. In those golden years, the family felt an immense sense of pride. They had woven their own success, thread by thread, proving that dedication and unity could conquer any obstacle. Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Curse. But fortune, as the old proverbs often warn, can be as fleeting as the morning mist. By the year 2011, the winds of luck had shifted. The lucrative contract with Disney was lost, and almost overnight, the steady hum of the sewing machines began to falter. Bills started piling up, and the once vibrant workshop grew worryingly quiet. In moments of deep financial stress, people often reach back to the oldest roots of their culture for comfort and answers. For generations,